It was in Sega's least successful period as a company that they attempted to do precisely what it is that their biggest fans are demanding they do right now. Hey, why don't we go back and try to revive Space Harrier as an intellectual property? Why don't we make a current gen version of Space Harrier with 3D polygonal graphics? Oh, yeah. Golden Axe. Everybody loves Golden Axe. It's going to be a big hit. Let's make a current gen version of Golden Axe with 3D polygonal graphics. Oh, let's go back and recapture the magic that was Virtua Fighter. Virtua Fighter 1. Let's recapture that low polygon, flat cell shaded aesthetic and combine it with the complexity of the moveset from Virtua Fighter 2. This is like sitting around with left-wingers who ask the question, why can't we just learn the lessons of history and not repeat the mistakes we made in the Vietnam War in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, that's the thing about history. Which lessons we were supposed to learn from the Vietnam War is infinitely debatable. And I have 3 versions of Virtua Fighter for the PlayStation 2. The differences between these 3 versions self-evidently were produced by deep divisions within the creative team who are sitting down at a boardroom table, tearing each other apart, fighting over what the best aspects of the classic games were that should be included in the revival of the intellectual property. Now, the first version of Virtua Fighter for the PlayStation 2 is simply titled Virtua Fighter 4. The follow-up, the update, the sequel is Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution, often referred to just as EVO, as Evo. And it may be that there are some technicalities that allow a player to cheat in one-on-one versus matchups that have been fixed. I've heard that said by people who are experts that, like, if you're organizing a tournament or a competition, you have to use the Evo version because, there were some weaknesses, some imbalances that could be exploited on one of those. But let me tell you something. Virtua Fighter 4 Evo is such a terrible game that there really is an argument that Virtua Fighter 4, period, pure and simple, the first iteration of the game, is a better game than its update. And the creative incoherence of the changes made in gameplay. I can only imagine these guys sitting there at a boardroom table, just furious with each other. Like, no, you don't understand how the jumping's supposed to work. No, you don't understand how the dodging mechanic into the background is supposed to work. No, this is a crucial difference between 3 and 4, and we have to get back to the way things were in Virtua Fighter 2. There is a version of Virtua Fighter 2 available in Japan only under the Sega Ages brand name. Good luck finding that. But I did say I have 3 versions of Virtua Fighter on the PlayStation 2, and this is the third one you're noticing here, the 10th anniversary edition. Depending on which zone you live in, you may be able to find this game as a separate disc unto itself, or it may be included on Virtua Fighter 4 Evo as a sort of bonus second version of the game on one and the same disc. So, at a time when these can be bought for $5, maybe $10, you might as well buy them all. But, they're terrible. These are unspeakably awful games. They discredit Sega in the same sense that the 3D update to Outrun, Space Harrier, Golden Axe, Virtua, the same way that this was so bad, was so terrible, that it discredits the company. Instead of reviving interest in the glory of their past, it makes you think they have no future. And indeed, they don't. You got to compare it to something. This is the same system that was home to Soul Calibur 2 and Soul Calibur 3. How many Tekken games? I mean, PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 combined. Tekken 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. with Tekken Tag somewhere in the middle, right? These were the glory days for Namco as a software developer, as working on arcade games that were then ported to these other systems. And I'm sorry, but like Soul Calibur 2 nakedly is a ripoff of and a recycling of Virtua Fighter 2. And it is better than Virtua Fighter 4, and it's infinitely better than even this like retro Virtua Fighter 10th Anniversary Edition. So you have to make the comparison to something. In the same period, when Sega was, as I say, ruining its reputation, discrediting itself, Namco was going back and reimagining and re-examining their own classic games, and they were not the only ones. So look, this is the era for when everyone wants to forget that Sega even existed as a company. This is an era when they're putting out an absolutely horrendous version of Shinobi, which is like a lame attempt to imitate Mario 64 with ninjas. This is this is an era in which Sega is like, you know, exploring the abyssal depths of their own creative bankruptcy. And they are finding that as you know, development times and development budgets get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the expectations from the audience get higher and higher and higher and more demanding, it is not so easy to go back and revisit and re-examine a classic and make it into something that's even marginally playable today. I am friends with other YouTubers who roll with Sega heavily. And, you know, some of them have Sega in the name of their YouTube channel. Some of them just openly kind of, you know, present themselves as people who've been, you know, deeply shaped by nostalgia for the 8-bit and 16-bit Sega generations their whole life long. And I am surprised how many of these guys were not familiar with, you know, the primary source material here when I ended up buying this stuff again for $5 here and there and sinking all of 5 minutes into playing it. And at the time, I was like, well, look, you're serious for the history of Sega. You've got to know this stuff. Oh, you've just got to get the adaptation of 18-Wheeler, the big rig truck racing game that Sega put together for the PlayStation 2, which is so much worse than what Namco is doing in the same period of time. And again, it's so much worse than what Capcom is doing in the same period of time. It's so much worse than what SNK is doing in the same period of time. You know, the Neo Geo games, they were also being reinvented and reinterpreted on the PlayStation 2 in both 2D and 3D forms. And those are better than what Sega managed to pull off. So remember at that time when I was first having this stuff show up in the mail after ordering it on eBay, I was encouraging these guys, well, look, you can't ignore that. Like, so much of your YouTube channel, so much your kind of research interest is in the history of Sega. You got to go back and revisit them. And it's only $5 and it's only 5 minutes of your time. But I have two conclusions to present to the audience here. One, this is not even worth $5 and 5 minutes of your time. And two, it raises real questions of what cannot be recaptured from the past. To what extent, you know, can we make, you know, artistic production, artistic artifacts from an earlier era into raw materials for something original, new, meaningful, creative in the current decade? And to what extent are they just ballast in the bottom of the boat that we've got to ignore? Why is it that Shakespeare still means something to audiences to this day and Ben Jonson does not? Why is it that, you know, Seneca, the ancient author of tragedies, Seneca meant so much to Shakespeare and to Ben Jonson, but audiences today can't relate to it, they neither has emotional significance nor symbolic significance nor anything else. Like, the study of the short history of Sega as a company is the history of a bunch of teams of creative people, like, making themselves obsolete in precisely the same decade when, as I say, other companies were finding other horizons.